Some palaces were not just built as homes, but powerful symbols of the rulers who commissioned them. Over the centuries, kings and queens have created incredible residences. We're going to count down 15 of the most amazing ancient palaces. Starting with 15, El Badi Palace. El Badi Palace, located in Marrakesh in Morocco, was commissioned by Sultan Aman al-Mansur of the Saadian dynasty in 1578, and it was completed in the early 17th century. Built to celebrate the Saadian victory over Portugal at the Battle of the Three Kings, the palace's name, El Badi, meaning the incomparable, reflected its ambition to showcase the wealth and power of Morocco during one of its most prosperous periods. The palace was constructed over a span of about 25 years using materials imported from across the Islamic world and Europe, marble from Italy, gold from the Sudan, and onyx from India that were brought to Marrakesh to decorate its walls. At its height, the complex reportedly featured 360 rooms, gardens and reflecting pools, and the central courtyard measured about 135 by 110 meters. It was one of the largest open spaces of its kind in the region. It served as the ceremonial and administrative center of the Saadian court. It hosted diplomatic receptions, religious celebrations, and royal audiences. It did house some royal family members, including queens and consorts who resided in private quarters separate from the public ceremonial areas, and its design reflected a blend of Moroccan, Andalusian, and Ottoman influences, all showing intricate stucco work, carved cedar ceilings, and elaborate tile patterns. But the decline of El Badi began in the late 17th century, when Sultan Ismail of the succeeding Alawite dynasty ordered much of its decoration stripped and transported to his new capital at Meknès. Despite that, the layout of the palace remains largely intact, and it provides some insight into the Saadian architecture and their urban planning strategy. Today, it's an open-air historical site. Although much of its ornamentation is lost, the scale of the ruins conveys the grandeur that once defined the Saadian dynasty's seat of power. Number 14. Topkapi Palace. Topkapi Palace, situated in Istanbul, Turkey, served as the primary residence and headquarters of the Ottoman sultans for nearly 400 years, from 1465 to 1856. Commissioned by Sultan Mehmed II shortly after the conquest of Constantinople in 1453, the palace evolved into a complex that symbolized Ottoman imperial authority. Covering about 700,000 square meters, it wasn't a single building, but a collection of pavilions, courtyards, and gardens, and service areas enclosed by high walls. The palace overlooks the Bosphorus Strait and the Golden Horn, offering some amazing views of maritime trade routes that sustained the Ottoman power. One of Topkapi's most famous sections is the harem, where the Sultan's family, including queens and consorts, resided. The harem functioned as both a private family residence and a center of their political influence, particularly during the 16th and 17th centuries. Its architecture includes intricately tiled chambers, courtyards, and ceremonial halls connected by narrow corridors, reflecting privacy and hierarchy. The palace also housed the imperial council chambers, the treasury, the kitchens capable of serving thousands of people, and among its most treasured artifacts are Islamic relics, imperial robes, and ceremonial weapons, many of which remain on display. Topkapi continued as the Ottoman court until the mid-19th century, when Sultan Abdülmecid I moved to a newly constructed palace. And following the dissolution of the Ottoman Empire, Topkapi became a museum in 1924 under the Republic of Turkey, one of the first major state museums of the modern era. Today, the palace is a UNESCO World Heritage Site and a major cultural landmark. It shows the architectural styles that evolved over the centuries, and it preserves artifacts central to Islamic and imperial history. Number 13. Hawa Mahal. The Hawa Mahal, or the Palace of the Winds, is one of the most iconic structures in India. It was built in 1799, and it was designed by an architect Lachal Ustad as an extension of the city palace complex. Though part of a larger royal residence, it was constructed primarily for women of the royal household, particularly the queens and princesses, who observed purdah, or seclusion, and they couldn't appear in public. The palace's facade allowed them to watch processions and street life without being seen themselves. The 5-story building rises about 15 meters, and it's made of red and pink sandstone, in keeping with Jaipur's architectural tradition. The facade, which resembles a honeycomb or the crown of the Hindu god Krishna, is punctuated by 953 small windows adorned with lattice work. This design offered privacy, but it also created a natural cooling effect, allowing air to flow freely through the structure. Internally, it consists of narrow halls and minimal living spaces. Unlike other grand palaces built for royal residence, it lacks the large halls or elaborate apartments. Instead, its purpose was functional, providing royal women with a vantage point to observe the city life, festivals, and parades. Over the centuries, it fell into neglect, but it was later restored in the 20th century. Preservation efforts have maintained its facade and reinforced the interior, ensuring that the building remains structurally sound while retaining its character. Today, it's a major tourist attraction and a symbol of Jaipur. Visitors can climb to the upper floors for panoramic views of the city, which display artifacts related to Jaipur's royal history. Number 12. Mysore Palace. Mysore Palace, also known as the Ambavilas Palace, is located in the city of Mysuru, formerly Mysore, in southern India. It served as the official residence of the Wadiyar dynasty, which ruled the kingdom of Mysore for several centuries. The current structure was completed in 1912 after a fire destroyed the previous wooden palace in 1897. It's a 3-story stone structure with marble domes and a 5-story tower set within a large complex that includes gardens, courtyards, and several smaller buildings. Its facade with the arched balconies and expansive verandas exemplifies the beauty associated with princely states during the British colonial period. Inside, it's richly decorated with intricately carved wooden doors, stained glass ceilings, and ornate mosaic floors. The Durbar Hall, where royal assemblies and ceremonies were held, features massive pillars and a ceiling adorned with paintings of the avatars of Vishnu. Another highlight is a marriage hall with a glass ceiling and elaborate tile work imported from England. The palace played a central role in the culture and political life of the kingdom. It was the residence of the Maharajas and their consorts, and it housed administrative offices too. Even after India's independence in 1947 and the abolition of princely privileges, the palace remained under the custody of the Wadiyar family, and it continues to host important events. Today, it's one of India's most visited monuments, attracting millions of people each year, and it's managed by the government of Karnataka, but it still retains areas reserved for the Wadiyar family. Its architecture and history and living cultural traditions makes it a vital part of India's royal heritage. Number 11. The Winter Palace. The Winter Palace in St. Petersburg. It's one of the most prominent surviving royal residences in Europe, and it served as the official home of the Russian monarchs from 1732 until the 1917 revolution. Built on the banks of the Neva River, this palace was central to the political and cultural life of the Russian Empire. Construction began in 1754 and was completed in 1762 during the reign of Empress Elizabeth Petrovna, daughter of Peter the Great. An Italian architect designed the building in the Baroque style, with massive facades stretching nearly 200 meters along the river. It's painted in green and white, and the exterior is adorned with ornate columns, statues, and balustrades, creating an impression of elegance. Although initially built for Elizabeth, she died before its completion, and the palace became closely associated with her successor, Catherine the Great. The interior of the palace contains 1,500 rooms, 117 staircases, and nearly 2,000 windows. Among its most notable spaces are the Jordan staircase used for state ceremonies, the Malachite room with walls lined in the rare green mineral, and the Grand Throne Room, which once hosted the imperial audiences. It was not only a royal residence, but a center of the administration and ceremony. The empresses and queens consort of Russia, including Catherine the Great and Maria Fedorovna, used the palace for both personal and political purposes. During the 19th century, it was also the backdrop to significant events, including the Decembrist Revolt in 1825 and the Bloody Sunday Massacre in 1905. Following the Revolution of 1917, though, the Winter Palace was stormed by Bolshevik forces during the October Revolution, marking the end of imperial rule in Russia. After the revolution, the palace was incorporated into the State Hermitage Museum, which today occupies the entire complex. The Hermitage houses one of the largest and most significant collections of art in the world, ranging from ancient artifacts to Renaissance masterpieces. As a UNESCO World Heritage Site, the Winter Palace is a cultural monument, and it's a reminder of the dramatic shift in Russian history. Number 10. The Alhambra. The Alhambra in Granada, Spain, is one of the best preserved examples of Islamic palatial architecture in Europe. It was originally constructed in the mid-13th century by the Nasrid dynasty. The Alhambra served as a fortress and a royal residence for the Muslim rulers. Its name derives from the Arabic Al-Qala Alhambra, meaning the Red Fortress, a reference to the reddish hue of the walls. The complex occupies a hilltop overlooking Granada and the fertile Vega Plain, with the Sierra Nevada mountains as a dramatic backdrop. The site combines defensive structures, residential quarters, and ceremonial spaces, which all reflect its dual role as a military stronghold and a seat of governance. The Nasrid palaces are the centerpiece of the complex, consisting of interconnected courtyards, halls, and gardens. The most famous area includes the Court of the Lions, with its 12 marble lion sculptures supporting a central fountain. The intricate stucco work, the honeycomb vaulting, and the calligraphy inscriptions throughout the palace exemplifies the height of Andalusian Islamic art and craftsmanship. And while built for Muslim rulers, its history spans multiple cultures. After the Reconquista in 1492, when Granada fell to Ferdinand and Isabella, the Catholic monarchs adapted part of the complex for their own use. Charles V later commissioned a Renaissance palace within the Alhambra grounds, though it remained unfinished. This blending of Islamic and Christian elements gives this site its distinctive layering. The Alhambra also housed royal women, including queens and consorts of the Nasrid dynasty, within secluded quarters, of course, but the spaces known as harems provided privacy and security, with access to gardens and fountains. Despite periods of neglect, though, the Alhambra survived largely intact due to its continued use and later recognition as a cultural treasure. It underwent significant restoration beginning in the 19th century, sparked in part by the romantic writings of travelers like Washington Irving, whose Tales of the Alhambra renewed European interest in the site. Today, it's one of Spain's most visited landmarks. Its combination of defensive architecture, refined artistry, and culture offer a window into the final flowering of Islamic rule in medieval Spain. Number 9. Chateau de Chambord. Chateau de Chambord, located in the Loire Valley of central France, is one of the most recognizable, largest castles built during the Renaissance period. Commissioned by King Francis I in 1519, the chateau was intended as a royal hunting lodge and a statement of the French monarchy's power. While it wasn't built exclusively for a queen, it did serve as a residence for various royal women, including queens, consorts, during royal hunting expeditions and courtly retreats. The design of the chateau is attributed to multiple architects, while possible contributions from Leonardo da Vinci did spend the last years of his life in France and influenced many of Francis I's projects. Its architecture combines medieval defensive elements like towers and a surrounding moat with Renaissance aesthetics characterized by symmetry, large windows, and elaborate roof lines. Its layout centers around a massive double helix staircase, which allows two people to ascend or descend simultaneously without crossing paths. That's an innovation often associated with Leonardo's influence. Chambord consists of more than 400 rooms, 80 staircases, and, amazingly, 365 fireplaces. Despite its size, the chateau is rarely used as a permanent residence due to its impractical location and its limited heating, functioned primarily as a seasonal retreat where the king and his entourage, including queens and noblewomen, participated in hunting parties within the surrounding forest. Over the centuries, it saw periods of neglect and restoration. During the reign of King Louis XIV, the Sun King, he used the chateau for hunting and hosted elaborate festivities, though it never became his primary residence. In later years, the building served various roles, including a brief occupation during the French Revolution, and it was used as a storage site for art treasures, including pieces from the Louvre during World War II. Today, the chateau is part of the UNESCO-listed Loire Valley, and it's open to the public. Visitors can explore the grand halls, the roof terraces, and the surrounding grounds. It's a symbol of royal extravagance and architectural innovation, and it bridges the medieval and early modern eras in European history. Number 8. The Pena Palace. Pena Palace, perched atop the Sintra Mountains in Portugal, is a striking example of 19th century Romanticism architecture. Commissioned by King Ferdinand II in 1838, the palace was built on the ruins of a 16th century monastery and completed in 1854. While not exclusively a royal residence, it did become the summer retreat of the Portuguese royal family, including Queen Maria II, Ferdinand's wife, who shared in its development and use. The palace's design reflects a revivalist approach. Painted in vivid hues of red, yellow, and blue, the palace contrasts dramatically with the lush green of the Sintra Hills and the Atlantic coast visible in the distance. The fantastical appearance with the domes, turrets, and decorative battlements exemplifies the romantic fascination with medieval revival and the exotic influences during the 19th century. The interiors are equally varied, featuring ornate stucco work, trompe-l'oeil ceilings, and period furnishings that showcase the tastes of Portugal's royal family during the Romantic period. Key rooms include the Arab Room, inspired by Islamic motifs, the Great Hall used for banquets and receptions, and private royal apartments, which remain preserved with original furnishings and personal belongings. Pena Palace also holds historical significance as a symbol of Portugal's constitutional monarchy during a period of political change in the 19th century. It remained in royal use until the early 20th century when the Portuguese monarchy was abolished in 1910. Following this, the palace was converted into a museum and then preserved as a national monument. Designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site as part of Sintra's cultural landscape, the palace is one of Portugal's most visited landmarks. It continues to draw visitors from around the world, offering a vivid glimpse into the imaginative spirit of the 19th century royal retreats and the fusion of art, nature, and history in Portuguese culture. Moving on to number 7, the Palace of Versailles. Of course, the Palace of Versailles, located about 20 kilometers southwest of Paris, is one of the most renowned royal residences in the world. Originally a hunting lodge built by King Louis XIII in 1623, it was transformed and massively expanded by his son Louis XIV, beginning in 1661. Under his direction, Versailles became not only the primary residence of the French monarchy, but also the administrative and cultural center of the kingdom. Queens of France, including Maria Theresa of Spain and later Marie Antoinette, resided here, making it one of the most historically significant palaces associated with both kings and queens. Architecturally, Versailles is a masterpiece of French Baroque design. The palace complex includes over 2,300 rooms arranged in a series of wings and courtyards, and one of its most iconic spaces is the Hall of Mirrors, a 73-meter-long gallery lined with 357 mirrors that reflect light from its windows that overlook the gardens. This hall served as the setting for court ceremonies, including the signing of the Treaty of Versailles in 1919, which ended World War I. The Queen's apartments, located opposite the King's apartments in the main building, feature elaborate decorations, and they were modified over time to accommodate successive queens, each leaving a mark on the space. The gardens of Versailles are equally significant. Spanning over 1,000 acres, they're laid out in a geometric pattern of fountains and groves. The Grand Canal and numerous ornamental basins reflect the grandeur here and were used for boating and firework displays during royal festivities. Surrounding the formal gardens are additional estates, including the Grand Trianon and the Petit Trianon. Those are smaller palaces used by queens like Marie Antoinette for more private retreats, away from court life. Versailles, though, was more than a royal residence. It was a symbol of absolute monarchy and centralized power. Louis XIV famously moved his entire court and government there, compelling nobles to live at Versailles to keep them under royal supervision. This transformation of a hunting lodge into the seat of power signaled a new era in French politics and culture, including palace design across Europe. Following the French Revolution in 1789, Versailles ceased to function as a royal residence, and many of its furnishings were sold or removed. However, the building itself remained intact, and in the 19th century it was converted into a museum of French history by King Louis Philippe. Since then, though, it's undergone extensive restoration, and it remains one of France's most visited monuments. It attracts millions of people each year. Number 6. Schönbrunn Palace. Schönbrunn Palace, located in Vienna, Austria, served as the primary summer residence of the Habsburg monarchs for over 300 years. Originally a hunting estate, it was transformed into a grand Baroque palace during the reign of Emperor Leopold I in the late 17th century. However, its most significant expansions and redesigns happened under Empress Maria Theresa in the mid-18th century, making it closely associated with her reign and role as one of Europe's most powerful queens. The complex consists of 1,441 rooms, although only a fraction are open to the public today. The architecture is Baroque style, with symmetrical facades, grand staircases, and richly decorated interiors. The ceremonial rooms, including the Great Gallery, are adorned with frescoes, gilded stucco, and crystal chandeliers, which reflects the lavish tastes of the Habsburg court. Maria Theresa used Schönbrunn as both a family home and a center for state affairs. It hosted numerous diplomatic events, including meetings with foreign dignitaries and grand banquets, and the palace is also notable as the birthplace of several Habsburg rulers, including Emperor Franz Joseph I, who later made Schönbrunn his primary residence. The emperor's wife, Empress Elizabeth, or Sisi, also lived there. Her apartments remain preserved as part of the palace tour. The surrounding gardens, too, are an integral part of their design. Created in a formal Baroque style, they feature symmetrical flower beds, tree-lined avenues, and elaborate fountains. At the highest point of the garden stands the Gloriette, a triumphal arch built in 1775 that provides views of Vienna. The grounds also include the Schönbrunn Zoo, established in 1752, which is the oldest continually operating zoo in the world. But Schönbrunn reflects the personal lives and the political ambition of the Habsburg dynasty. It was here that important decisions were made during periods of war and peace, and where the family hosted musical performances by composers like Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, who played for Maria Theresa as a child prodigy. The palace remains central royal residence until the end of the Habsburg monarchy in 1918. But today, the palace is one of Austria's most popular tourist attractions. It provides a comprehensive view of imperial life in Central Europe, illustrating the culture and political influence of the Habsburgs across centuries. Number 5. The Potala Palace. The Potala Palace, located in Lhasa in Tibet, is a monumental structure that served as the chief residence of the Dalai Lama from the 17th century until 1959. Though not built for kings or queens in the Western sense, it functioned as the political and spiritual center of Tibetan Buddhism. Construction on the current palace began in 1645 under the rule of the 5th Dalai Lama, Lobsang Gyatso, and was largely completed by 1649. It was built on the Marpori, the Red Hill, at an elevation of about 3,700 meters, that's over 12,000 feet, making it one of the highest palaces in the world. The site has been sacred for centuries, and the 5th Dalai Lama's vision expanded the site into a massive complex that symbolized the unification of spiritual and temporal authority in Tibet. Now, the palace is divided into two main sections, the White Palace and the Red Palace. The White Palace served as the living quarters and administrative offices of the Dalai Lama, while the Red Palace was devoted to religious functions. The palace contains over 1,000 rooms, including ceremonial halls, the tombs of past Dalai Lamas, and vast storerooms for treasures and artifacts. Architecturally, it's an extraordinary blend of Tibetan and Himalayan styles. The massive stone walls, sloping inward for stability, are painted white, while the upper sections of the Red Palace are adorned with red and gold. The complex is known for its murals, the intricate woodwork, and richly decorated interiors, which illustrate Buddhist cosmology, religious figures, and historical events. The palace also functioned as a fortress, with walls up to 5 meters thick and strategic vantage points over the Lhasa Valley. After the 1959 Tibetan uprising and the subsequent flight of the 14th Dalai Lama to India, the Potala Palace ceased to function as a political residence, and it became a museum under Chinese administration. Despite the changes, though, it does retain immense cultural significance for Tibetans and Buddhists. Its survival offers a rare, intact example of Tibetan monastic palatial architecture, and it is a reminder of Tibet's historical role as a center of Buddhist learning and governance. Number 4. The Palace of the Grand Masters. The Palace of the Grand Masters in Rhodes, Greece, is one of the most striking medieval structures. A monumental reminder of an era when crusading knights controlled key trade routes and fortified themselves against constant threats from rival powers. Located in the old town of Rhodes, which itself is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, this palace served for centuries as the administrative headquarters and residence of the Knights Hospitaller, later known as the Knights of St. John. Its history spans Byzantine fortifications, medieval Crusader rule, Ottoman control, Italian occupation, and even modern Greek stewardship, and it remains an extraordinary example of the layered history of the Eastern Mediterranean. Construction of the palace during the 14th century reflected the knight's dual role as both a religious order and a governing authority. Unlike palaces built primarily for the luxury of kings and queens, this palace of the Grand Masters balanced defensive strength with functional administrative spaces. Pointed arches, ribbed vaults, and crenellated towers defined its silhouette, while the overall layout adhered to a simple rectangular plan organized around a central courtyard. The courtyards paved with stones and later inlaid with Roman and Byzantine mosaics that were repurposed from ruins across the island, and it functioned as the core of palace life. Inside the palace, the ground floor housed storerooms, workshops, stables, and cisterns, which were essential for sustaining the garrison during a siege. The upper floor contained the residential and ceremonial chambers, including the audience hall, the council chamber, private apartments for the Grand Master, chapels, and guest quarters. The Hall of the Council was particularly significant, as it was here that the key decisions about defense and governance of roads were debated and enacted. The Great Reception Hall, with its vaulted ceilings and expansive proportions, served as the venue for feasts, diplomatic relations, and celebrations. Under Ottoman rule, which lasted from 1522 until the early 20th century, the Palace of the Grand Masters underwent some changes. It was repurposed as the residence of the local Ottoman governor and adapted to suit the administrative needs of the new rulers. The Ottomans maintained the palace primarily for practical governance rather than lavish display, and while some decorative elements were removed or altered, the building's military character endured. The 19th century brought further challenges to the palace's survival. In 1856, a catastrophic explosion devastated a portion of the complex. Lightning struck a nearby church that was being used to store gunpowder, triggering a blast that destroyed much of the interior and collapsed sections of the wall. The fortunes of the palace shifted in the early 20th century during the Italian occupation of Rhodes, which began in 1912 following the Italo-Turkish War. The Italians viewed the medieval heritage of Rhodes, particularly the legacy of the Knights Hospitaller, as part of a broader Mediterranean narrative that they sought to connect to their own national identity. Under the regime of Benito Mussolini, a major restoration of the Palace of the Grand Masters was undertaken between 1930 and 1940. The restoration, while extensive, was controversial. The Italians aimed to merely not preserve the structure, but to transform it into a showcase of fascist architectural ideals. Modern materials, including reinforced concrete, were used alongside traditional stone, and certain elements like mosaics imported from Kos and other islands were added to enhance the palace's visual impact. Today, the palace is one of the most visited landmarks in Greece, attracting hundreds of thousands of tourists each year. Inside, restored halls display mosaics, furniture, and artifacts from the island's layered history, allowing visitors to trace Rhodes' evolution from Byzantine stronghold to Crusader bastion, Ottoman provincial capital to modern Greek heritage site. For the people of Rhodes, it's a reminder of their island's resilience and importance across centuries of conflict and change. Number 3. The Forbidden City. The Forbidden City in Beijing, China, is the largest and most complete surviving palace complex in the world. It was built in the early 15th century and it served as the imperial residence and administrative heart of China for nearly 500 years. It remains one of the most important symbols of China's imperial past, and it's known for its harmony, its size, and its deep symbolism. Construction began in 1406 during the reign of the Yongle Emperor, following his decision to move the Ming capital from Nanjing to Beijing. The project employed over 1 million people, including thousands of artisans who specialized in carving, painting, and decorative tile work. Materials came from across the empire: lumber from distant forests, marble from quarries near Beijing, and golden glazed tiles produced in special imperial kilns. After 14 years of continuous work, the Forbidden City was completed in 1420, establishing a new center of political life for Imperial China. It covers about 180 acres and contains nearly 1,000 surviving buildings, arranged in a carefully planned layout. It's all enclosed by a 10-meter-high wall and surrounded by a wide moat, emphasizing the exclusivity and defensive strength of it. The outer court's 3 great halls, the Hall of Supreme Harmony, the Hall of Central Harmony, and the Hall of Preserving Harmony, served as the ceremonial center of the empire. The Supreme Harmony Hall, the largest wooden building in China, was where emperors held enthronements, royal weddings, and important state events. Decorated with gilded dragons and supported by massive wooden beams, it projected the immense authority of the Son of Heaven. Behind the outer court lay the inner court, which contained the Palace of Heavenly Purity, the Hall of Union, and the Palace of Earthly Tranquility, representing the emperor's residence. Life inside the Forbidden City was strictly regimented. At its peak, it housed thousands of people, including the emperor, the empress, concubines, eunuchs, and court officials. The women of the court, particularly the empress and favored consorts, wielded significant influence within the inner palace. Empress Dowager Cixi, one of the most powerful women in Chinese history, effectively ruled the empire from behind the walls of the Forbidden City during the late 19th century. The design of it, though, is rich with symbolism. Yellow glazed roof tiles reserved for the emperor cover nearly every building, while the recurring use of the number 9, a symbol of supreme power, appears in gate studs, staircases, and architectural proportions. Decorative motifs like dragons representing imperial authority and phoenixes representing the empress are found throughout the complex. But over the centuries, it's witnessed countless events in Chinese history, from imperial coronations and diplomatic receptions to palace intrigues and even coups. It's remained the seat of power until 1912, when the last emperor, Puyi, abdicated, marking the end of over 2 millennia of imperial rule in China. In 1925, the Forbidden City was transformed into the Palace Museum, opening its gates to the public for the first time in history. Its collections include priceless imperial artifacts like ceramics, jade, paintings, and ceremonial regalia, offering insight into the daily life and ceremonial practices of the imperial court and its peoples. The influence it had on Chinese architecture was profound, inspiring palaces, temples, and government buildings across Asia for centuries. Number 2. Prague Castle. Prague Castle, situated on a hill overlooking the Vltava River, is the largest ancient castle complex in the world and a central landmark of the Czech capital. Continuously occupied for more than 1,000 years, it served as the residence of Bohemian kings, Holy Roman emperors, and more recently, the presidents of Czechoslovakia and the Czech Republic. This complex of palaces, churches, courtyards, and gardens reflect a millennium of architectural evolution and political history. The origins of Prague Castle date to the late 9th century. The position high above the river made it an ideal center for defense and administration, and early structures included a simple wooden fort and the Church of the Virgin Mary, followed by the Basilica of St. George in the 10th century. Significant expansion happened during the 14th century under Charles IV, King of Bohemia and Holy Roman Emperor. He initiated the construction of St. Vitus Cathedral, envisioned as a grand Gothic cathedral that would serve as the coronation church. Although work on the cathedral extended over the centuries, it wasn't completed until 1929. Its spires and stonework came to dominate the skyline and symbolize the spiritual and political heart of the Czech lands. The complex itself grew steadily over the centuries, incorporating Renaissance, Baroque, and Neo-Gothic elements as successive rulers left their mark. The old royal palace, built in the 12th century and expanded in later periods, contained Vladislav Hall, an immense late Gothic space with an innovative vaulted ceiling. Adjacent to this palace are St. George's Basilica, with its austere Romanesque architecture, and the Golden Lane, a row of colorful 16th century houses that once had castle guards, goldsmiths, and later writers like Franz Kafka. Prague Castle was not only a royal residence, but also the seat of government and a fortress. Its walls and towers withstood sieges during the Hussite Wars in the 15th century and later conflicts, though the castle also witnessed dramatic events like the defenestration of Prague in 1618, when Protestant nobles threw Catholic officials out of a palace window. Despite damage from wars and fires, though, the complex was continually rebuilt and adapted to changing needs, resulting in its distinctive blend of styles. In the modern era, Prague Castle retained its political significance. After the dissolution of the Austro-Hungarian Empire in 1918, it became the seat of the newly formed Czechoslovakia president, a role it continues to serve for the Czech Republic today. Prague Castle is one of the most visited historic sites in Europe and a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Visitors will explore the St. Vitus Cathedral, Old Royal Palace, and the museums and galleries, which house the Czech crown jewels and national treasures. As the largest ancient castle complex still in use, it embodies over a millennium of Central European history, offering an unbroken connection between the medieval kingdoms of Bohemia and the modern Czech state. Number 1. Buckingham Palace. Buckingham Palace, located in Westminster, London, is the official residence and administrative headquarters of the British monarch. Originally built in 1703 as Buckingham House for the Duke of Buckingham, it was acquired by King George III in 1761 for Queen Charlotte, transforming it into a private royal residence. Since then, it's evolved into one of the most iconic palaces in the world. It underwent significant enlargement during the reign of King George IV in the early 19th century, when the architect John Nash transformed it into a royal residence. Expansions continued under Queen Victoria, who moved into the palace in 1837, making her the first reigning monarch to use it as her official London residence. The current building contains 775 rooms, including 19 staterooms, 52 royal and guest bedrooms, 188 staff bedrooms, 92 offices, and 78 bathrooms. Architecturally speaking, Buckingham Palace is a blend of Georgian and neoclassic styles, with later additions reflecting some Victorian taste. Its facade, familiar worldwide from televised royal events, was remodeled in 1913 by Sir Aston Webb using Portland stone. The central balcony of the building has become an image of the monarchy, where royal family members appear during national celebrations. Inside the palace, though, the staterooms are richly decorated with artworks from the royal collection, including works by Rembrandt, Rubens, and Vermeer. The throne room is used for ceremonial receptions, while the White Drawing Room serves as a principal reception area. Other notable spaces include the Picture Gallery and the Ballroom, and the latter being the largest room in the palace and the venue for state banquets. The palace also has the Queen's Gallery, a public art gallery displaying rotating exhibits from the royal collection, and the Royal Mews, where ceremonial carriages and horses are kept. The gardens, too, they cover 39 acres, and they're the largest private gardens in London, and they host annual garden parties attended by thousands of people. During World War II, the palace did suffer some bomb damage on several occasions, which symbolized the solidarity between the monarchy and the British people. Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, famously refused to leave the palace during the Blitz, declaring that she wanted to endure the same hardships as Londoners. That connection between palace and people has endured, with Buckingham Palace continuing to serve as the backdrop for major national events and public gatherings. Today, Buckingham Palace remains a working royal residence, used for official functions, receptions, and administrative duties. Its continued role as both a home and an administrative center makes it unique among European royal residences, bridging centuries of tradition with the ongoing duties of the modern monarchy.